Welcome to week 1 of the Pacific Northwest Sew-Along in collaboration with Lamb Farm Designs and RebsFabStash. So I want to show you the little tips and tricks putting this block together. This one is pretty straightforward. I don't have a book yet because we're filming this early and the books are still in production, but you're going to be making this week, you're going to be making 3 falling leaves, and you're going to be making them out of the light red fabric, and you're going to go to page 18 in your book. So you will have a nice spiral bound book. You'll already have it by the time you're starting this sew along. And the cutting directions are right here on the bottom of page 18. You can either do 1 leaf at a time, or you can cut for all 3 at a time since you're using the same fabrics. So in this particular instance, I don't have the name of the fabric that you're using because you're going to be making multiple leaves throughout the year and you're going to be making them in different colors. So your leaf fabric this time is the light red. And I already went ahead and I put it on my swatch sheet. I already cut out. So I have my background pieces A and B, and then I have my leaf pieces C and D, and I have enough here for 3 blocks. I'm only going to be making 1 block while you're on video with me. Since we're all cut out, I'm just going to flip my book over and we're going to get started. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make half square triangles. Now you'll find as you're sewing through this year with me that I like to cut my half square triangles about 1/8 of an inch bigger and square them up at the end because I'm a little futzy that way, but also I found through the years that if I cut bigger and square up, it saves me in the long run time trying to make everything fit and match and possibly tearing out. So that's how I am going to do this sew along, and that's how I wrote the book. If that's not your cup of tea, you can reduce by 1/8 of an inch and still use the same way that I am going to show you. You just will skip the squaring up process. I don't recommend it, but you know, everybody do their own thing on this. So, and at the beginning of the book are directions on all the basics things that I do in my book. Half square triangles, flying geese, and flipped corners. So you'll see how I do that. And then instead of writing that every time so that you have a 100-page book, it's in the beginning and you're going to do it the same way. And I'm going to walk you through it on these videos. So the first thing that it tells you to do is make your half square triangles out of A and D. You need 2 A squares and you need 2 D squares. Again, everything's cut and labeled. I pre-starched my fabric. And it advises you to draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of your lighter square. I am going to skip that step because if you see here, I have the diagonal seam tape by Cluck Cluck Sew, and I have it down on my machine. And this saves me from drawing the diagonal lines. So I don't want to draw my diagonal lines, so I don't do them. But you can do that if you want to. I'm just going to skip that step and line it up right here on my tape. Okay, so you're going to want to watch because there is a fine line on the background fabric between right and wrong sides. So I've already flipped mine to the right side so that when I go like this, I know that I have right sides together. Line them up. Again, I have the diagonal tape, so I'm not going to draw my diagonal. And you can see that I always start off with a leader and an ender for these projects because this is such a sampler quilt, there is not a lot of chain piecing. So I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch to the left of my drawn line that's not there because I'm using the tape. If you are using the tape, the red line on your tape is right on your drawn line stitching, and the black line to the right is 1/4 of an inch to the left. So run this through. Now this is about as chain piecing as you can get on these sampler blocks. You can take these to your table, your cutting table, and you can use a rotary. I just really like these Olfa scissors. They have a little bit of a serrated blade, so they grab. And unless I'm doing a really big half square triangle, or a whole bunch of them, I'll just generally use my scissors to cut them apart. Now, your directions also in your book tell you where you're going to press to. So you'll be able to see here that you're going to press to C, which is your dark fabric. Okay, so here's my starch pen, and since this is the first time I'm using it today for my project, I am going to prime it a little bit and just push the tip in. You can see my tips getting kind of worn. You can always buy new tips. I like them when they get a little worn. So I always hit my thread, my seam line, with my hot iron. I think it sets your stitching if you're using 100% cotton thread, but it also makes your fabric a little more limp, so it folds over easier. Then I just run my starch pen on there and hit it again with my dry iron. I really like to have a little wool pressing mat and a dry iron set, a mini iron set up next to me, and that way I can get the most out of my sewing as I go. And you can see once you starch that down, let me not starch this one. You can see how that has a ripple and a fold. Starch it, and it takes that out and makes it completely flat. So I'm going to press those. This is enough for one block. I'm going to leave my cap off because I'm going to use it the whole time. Okay, now your directions tell you that you want to square these to 2.5 inches. You cut these to 3, so you've got just enough wiggle room. If you're not interested in squaring up, cut your A and C units to 2 7/8. Now I'm going to square with my block lock ruler and show you the first cut. There's lots of ways to do this, but you line it up and your gutter of your block lock just locks against that seam. So I'm not having to make sure that my diagonal is on there, but I'm going to show you both ways to square up. Now I have a little rotary because I find if I use my big rotary that I kind of shave off the corner of my ruler. So I'm just going to give it a quick. Now there's lots of ways to do it with the block lock. I do one side, flip my stack over, but you can also, if you're really crafty, do it like that. But I prefer to do it like this. So I'll square 2 of these up using the block lock, and then I'll square 2 of them up using a regular bias square ruler if you don't have the block locks. So then I just flip my ruler so that my gutters go in the right direction, and then line it up on 2.5. I already have my bias here. And the important thing about having your bias line right on the center seam is if you're off at all, these intersection points are not going to be in the corners and your square is going to be wonky. Goodness, we don't want any wonky squares. Not if we can help it. So this is quick and easy for me. Let me grab my other ruler and I'll show you how I square up without it. Okay, you can see my poor little worn out, I think it's a 4-inch. And how I do it is now I still want to watch my 2.5 line. I want to make sure that I have enough wiggle room all the way around my block, and I want to make sure my bias line is right on the center. So I've done that. So it just takes a little bit more futzing around to do that. And then I'm going to flip it around like this, and I don't have to flip my ruler. And again, I want my 2.5 mark here and here. I want my bias line on the bias of my block, my center bias seam, and then I just trim it off again. So that's as easy as it gets. Either way, you can trim whichever way you like. Now look what's going to happen. I don't want to square this up wrong, but if you're just looking at your 2.5 seam and you're not paying attention to your bias, look right here where the point of my ruler is. It's not on that seam. And then when you sew it into your next block and take 1/4 inch on each side, it's going to be more noticeable. So you really want to square up half square triangles with a bias ruler. And then I'll have a future video at some point. I don't think I have any hourglass blocks or 1/4 square triangles in this quilt, but I'll do a little how you square up with that too, because that's super important on those. Okay, so we're squared up. Now we're ready to rock. It's time now to put our block together. So you'll see in your directions in your book, your block sections are, well, it shows you here and your pressing arrows. So let's do that next. And then when you go to put your whole block together, there's solid lines dividing where these pieces go. And you always got your pressing arrows in here. So let's make the points of our leaf now. So we're going to lay out 2, and it's really important on these to look at the orientation of the dark and the light because they're not the same. You're not making 2 exact units and one of them adding B to the end. You're making 2 different units. Okay, so this side one, you're going to want your light red oriented up this way, and for here you want it down this way. Okay, so let's make the top one. To lay it out, we need 2 half square triangles and 1 B. And how I do it is I just always work from the right to the left. I'm going to pick these up, line it up. They all should fit pretty perfectly because you squared up your half square triangles. So I always use, let me get these out of our way. I always use 100% cotton neutral thread. You can see that I'm stitching with a light gray. I'm not going to use, I have a little bit of a darker neutral that I use on more of my Civil War fabrics because they generally don't have a light background. They have more of a tan. But this time I'm using a light gray. You could also use a light cream. And because you're of the white, you don't want to go too dark. You don't want it to show at your seams. So now this shows you how to press. And this way I'm going to press to B first. I'm going to hit it with my dry iron. Also, the nice thing about the 50 weight Aurifil is it's thin and you don't lose a lot in your fold over, which is super important. And these are both going the same direction. And I'm just going to hit it with my irons dry. You can pick these up at Walmart or at your favorite quilt store. And you'll see that my seams are flipping over to the right, and that's how I wanted it pressed to the right. So the way I remember that is the way that it's going to press to is always on the top when I'm pressing. I'm sure you've got your own tricks. Now let's sew these 2 together. Again, I like to pick up, so I've got this oriented like this. I'm going to switch it so that I know in my head which way I'm flipping. We've all got our own little things that we do to keep us straight. The other thing I don't do is I rarely take a scant 1/4 of an inch. You're going to have to figure out where your 1/4 inch is for you. And I'll show you on this next block a way to do that. This isn't the best example, but we're going to have some future blocks where you can really test that, and you can test it with the pieces that you have cut. And you'll know if you need to do a scant 1/4 inch or not. What I find also is I don't like to mess with my scant 1/4 inch, my 1/4 inch in my head, because I know how I sew and how I sew every time. So what I want to do, if that's the case and I have a newer machine where I can set my needle, is I'll just move my needle position like 1 to the left, 1 click, 1 to the right to adjust my seam. And I find that's easier. Then I'm not messing in my head as to what works for me. You find what works for you. If a 1/4 inch works for you, use it. You just want to be pretty accurate on these blocks. And I also find if I take a scant 1/4 inch and the block has tons of piecing, then my block ends up bigger. You know, maybe a 1/4 of an inch bigger than it should, because every seam I took a scant and it just multiplies and multiplies and multiplies with a lot of piecing. So I'll show you in some future blocks how I do that and how I test myself. And I'll probably put out a beginner video here pretty quickly, and you can always refer to that if you want to check that before you ever get farther into your quilt. So again, I know that this time I am pressing towards the light. I want to click it with my hot dry iron. And I'm just going to run my thing across it, my starch pen. Now I'm ready to put my blocks together. So I'm going to lay it out just like it's oriented. I need a C. And you can see here on the directions, the first thing I need to sew is my short unit to my D. The other thing I like to do is when I'm sewing a pieced piece into a straight cut piece with no piecing, I'll flip it over because I know that this is true. This is a true cut. I just made it. And that way, if I have a wiggle or anything in my piecing, I'm going to follow my line of my not pieced cut because I know that's going to be the most accurate. cut off my leader. And you'll find if you use leaders and enders, you get a lot less knots beginning and ending no matter what machine you have. You don't have to hold your thread over if you don't have an automatic cutting machine. And it saves a ton of thread, which, you know, could be important to some. It's kind of important to me. I do a lot of piecing. So you can see my points came out like they should. This goes to the right. Now I'm going to add my top piece on there. I don't do a lot of pinning, but I usually pin if I have an intersection. Now you can glue with your glue, and you can watch a lot of precision piecing, Acorn precision piecing videos out there. They use the glue for everything. I use the glue for flip corners, and I'll show you that on the next week's block. So I like to pin my intersection. That's my only pin. We've got our block made. Now we're going to press this up. So I'm going to make sure that I have that piece on top. That's the piece that bends in the seam allowance. We do have a little bit of bulk here, right where this one is. If you're more comfortable pressing open, please do that. I rarely press open. I like my seams to nest. So here we go. We've got our first block made. Now you're going to want to repeat that, and you're going to want to make 2 more so that you have a total for week 1 of 3 light red falling leaf blocks. Page 18 in your directions.